everyone to our very first Metaverse session. We know that this topic is quite new to the world and to Deloitte, and not everything is set in stone yet. So this session will be more about the basics of the Metaverse, so what is it and what does it mean for Deloitte. After this session, we will also organize deep dives, where you will really dive into the topics and learn what it means specific for you. Before we start, I have 2 practical notes. The first one is that it will be an interactive session, so please keep your phone close and the instructions will follow during the session. And secondly, there will be a Q&A in the end. So if you have questions, please use the chat, ask your questions there, and in the end we will come back to it. So having that said, enjoy the session.
The metaverse.
The metaverse.
Metaverse. The metaverse.
The metaverse.
The metaverse. The metaverse.
The metaverse.
The metaverse, a digital frontier. I kept picturing our virtual avatars. What would they look like? Blue, green, ships, motorcycles. A next frontier for us to explore. I kept dreaming of a world I thought I'd never see. And then, one day, I got in. My name is Aragorn Mullendijks, and I'm the CMO at a Dutch company called Beamup. And we are building a platform called Your Open Metaverse. The metaverse, we've heard it about 26 times now in this intro, and today I want to explore with you what it is, or perhaps more importantly, what it isn't. But before we get started, I want to make this an interactive session. I want to know what you guys out there are thinking of when we say the metaverse. And for that, we have a little interactive thing called Deloitte Vote, which is going to show you a QR code right now. So take out your phone, scan this QR code, and tell me in 1 or 2 words what you think the metaverse is, and then we'll discuss that. So I hope you have your phone out right now. You're scanning this, and you're already telling me what your thoughts are on the metaverse, and I'm pretty sure that pretty soon the team is going to show me on screen what the answers are so far. I like this one. So somebody put in no idea. Digital meeting place, virtual universe, virtual world. Second Life, digital meeting place, Facebook, that's a very interesting one. No clue, 3D world. I'm going to let this play out a little bit, but some words are already becoming bigger. Virtual world is definitely one that you guys really think of when looking at the metaverse. Virtual reality is coming up, no idea. Apparently a lot of people still have no idea what to think of, which, by the way, I think that's it's great. If you have no idea and you can recognize you have no idea, that's a very good starting point. It's like a clean slate. So let's dive into this a little bit. The metaverse. A virtual world is something that's been mentioned many, many times, and I'm going to come back to that. First, before we go into what the metaverse is, let's take a moment to consider what the metaverse is not. What the metaverse is not is something that can be owned, controlled by any single entity, company, or person. It is also not one single virtual environment. It's not something that one person or one team can say, we're going to build the metaverse. Like the internet, it's not so much a one thing or one place, but it's the collective of experiences, environments, activities that make it the metaverse. A better way, or one way of looking at it, is to look at the quote from Jamie Burke, who is the CEO of Outlier Ventures, which is an authority on the metaverse currently. The way he put it is, an individual game or social network cannot, in isolation, be the metaverse, unless it were to entirely monopolize our digital lives. So what is the metaverse then? We know what it isn't, but what is it? Well, my way of explaining what the metaverse is very simple. The metaverse is a complete paradigm shift in how we as human beings interact with each other and with reality itself. Well, what does that really mean? A different way of looking at it is the metaverse is an ecosystem, in essence mostly economic, but not limited to, that connects interoperable, and this is a term we're going to come back to because interoperability is extremely important for the metaverse, experiences, worlds, and platforms. First of all, a thing that you need to understand about the metaverse is that there's different ways of approaching how you build this. And some of you that are now in this session might have already heard the term metaverse in marketing all over the world. Because right now, you know, like it or not, ever since the big announcement by the Zuck last October and the acquisition of Activision Blizzard and the consecutive Keynote by Satya Nadella, the metaverse has become a massive hype. But what most people still think of is what we saw in the word cloud, a virtual world. And in fact, that is only one aspect of it, but not an unimportant one. And so as a result of that, there's already a lot of projects out there that call themselves metaverses, whether they are or are not. And some of them are building on blockchain technology. Think of Somnium Space, think of Sandbox, and think of Decentraland. But I already mentioned interoperability as an essential part of the metaverse. I already told you that it's about a grander ecosystem that connects all these experiences and platforms. So for a platform like Decentraland to call itself a metaverse or the metaverse is technically, unfortunately, not entirely true. It will only become or be a metaverse once it is connected to other experiences like it. And this is what we call layer 2 metaverses. Each of these worlds are already predefined. They are already filled with certain laws of physics, if you will, certain economic rules or regulations that they have to abide by. To give you an example, in Decentraland, it's all about virtual real estate. And in the Sandbox, it's also about virtual real estate, but everybody looks pretty blocky, right? That's how things look. And we as users, or even if you buy a plot in that world, you cannot change that. So one of the problems that needs to be solved for the true metaverse to come true is that interoperability. These worlds need to be connected. Now there's two ways people are trying to solve that. The first one is through what we call a third-party kind of connectivity, which an example of that could be Metamundo, Metaportal. Basically what they do is they act like a technological babelfish that will translate the virtual assets and activities or transfer your super profile through blockchain technology from one world to the other. But we're far off of making that work seamlessly. Another approach is what we call the layer 1 metaverse, which is what we're building at your open metaverse, which basically is like a YouTube of the future, if you will, which facilitates a platform where anybody can upload their verse or their experience or their world, and once it's uploaded, it instantly becomes interoperable and connected to the other verses on top of the platform. All of them sitting on top of one single blockchain that connects them, which then in turn in the future can be connected to other metaverses, even like Sandbox or Decentraland or Somnium Space, because they're all built on blockchains, and we are looking at a multi-chain blockchain future. But this is a different and complicated issue, so or topic, so I won't go into that too deeply today. Now, we've talked about the metaverse. I've tried to keep it as simple as possible in terms of how it all works together and how that ecosystem works. But why should you care, right? You're probably sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, I'm never going to wear a digital headset like that. I'm not going to do that. And still, we see that there's already a massive trend towards the metaverse. There's already a market starting to grow. And for the next thing, I have a vote again for you guys, because I want you to think about what the size of that market might be. So right now we're going to get the Deloitte vote again, and I want you guys to tell me how big you think the current metaverse market is. Here we go. I'm going to wait for the first answer, or the first few answers. Let's see. Huge. Okay, that's a great answer. I want to give kudos to whoever put that up. Anybody put in any numbers? It's a little hard for me to read. 1 billion, 11 billion, 17 billion, 200 billion, 1,000 billion. Okay, I like it. I like it. I like where this is going. Only 4 visible interested. I don't know how that is evaluation, but thank you for that input. Okay, so actually right now, the metaverse market today is already worth a whopping, right slide, a whopping 48 billion US dollars. And at current market growth, expectations are that by the year 2028, that will go 17x, meaning that the metaverse market itself will be a whopping 828 billion US dollars worth. Personally, I think that is an extremely low estimate. And the reason for that is that none of us, nobody today, can really understand truly what the metaverse is or will be in the future. Think of it like this. Some of you might have seen on YouTube movies or videos of people at the end of the 90s talking about mobile phone, mobile internet. What is it going to do? Do you want it? There's even a Dutch video asking people, do you have a mobile phone? Do you want one? And people answer things like, no, I don't want one. I don't care. Or I just bought an answering machine from a student in Groningen. And he says, people can reach me that way. And then there's this mother who says, imagine this, I've taken the kids to school and somebody would call me on my phone. People thought, it was nice to have maybe, but probably not something that would change or affect their lives at all. And yet, they could not, no matter how much they wanted maybe, they couldn't completely comprehend the changes that were coming down the road. In less than a decade, their lives, our lives, were completely transformed because of mobile internet, mobile phones, smartphone technology, touchscreens, and everything that came with it. Apps. Today, we have everything on our phone. Our banking, our health, our doctor's appointment, our calendar, our email. We app in 5 different apps. We watch videos, we listen to music, all at the touch of our fingers. That's something that these people could not imagine at the end of the 90s. And so, we cannot imagine today truly how the metaverse will change your life. The one thing we do know is that the rate of change that was at the end of the 90s until now is going to happen again, but at a factor times 10 maybe, and maybe in less time, or probably in less time. So the next question I have, which is really important for that, for us to try and understand what's coming our way, is what technologies underpin the metaverse? And so again, I want to do a quick little Deloitte vote. You guys tell me, what are the technologies that you're thinking of right now that you think are a part of the metaverse? I love it. The first one is blockchain. AI. So we can see where the expertise is here at Deloitte. Web 3.0, collaboration, internet, Unreal Engine, NFTs, VR. Yep. Yes, you guys are definitely thinking in the right direction. I see that somebody wrote their hype. So this person doesn't really believe in the metaverse, but we'll get to that in a second. I saw you. I know you're there. Cool. So, technologies. Let's talk about those. Most of you already had a good idea of what technologies underpin the metaverse. There's a few important ones. There's more that are not even on my slide right now, but let's dive into these just very shortly. We have blockchain, we have artificial intelligence, we have virtual reality and augmented reality, we have spatial computing, which is related to virtual reality and augmented reality, but sits on itself, which has to do with how we generate 3-dimensional assets and 3-dimensional worlds. Examples of that is Unreal Engine and Unity, of course. There's the super important 5G+, right? Our ability to be wirelessly connected all the time and to transfer all that data that's necessary. And then there's human-machine interfacing, which is not unimportant, and I think that will also be revolutionizing over the next few years. Already, you have things like this Whoop that I have right here that measures my heart rate at 100 times per second, giving me information about my skin temperature, my autonomous nervous system, my heart rate, etc., etc., telling me how fit I am, if I slept enough, etc., etc. And that's only going to get bigger and stronger. Companies like Neuralink by Elon Musk are experimenting with connecting our brain directly to computer interfacing, which will completely revolutionize as well our world. I would like to go into artificial intelligence, but I'm pretty sure that you guys know a lot about that already. So what I want to look at quickly is blockchain, because blockchain is absolutely essential for the metaverse, and we'll quickly find out why. When we think of blockchain, what's important for us to realize when it comes to the metaverse is it's peer-to-peer networking, which makes it possible to have trustless transactions, very important, and on top of these can be programmability layers. Now, I know that Bitcoin in itself is the first cryptocurrency and first blockchain, well, not first blockchain, but first cryptocurrency has not so much of that programmability, at least to a lesser extent, but specifically Ethereum, has really revolutionized the blockchain technology again in itself by enabling us to make what we call smart contracts. And this has led to many applications that are growing at an exponential rate in both how we use them and the amount that we have and how they impact our world. So just to name a few, we have, of course, decentralized finance, which I don't think I need to explain this to the viewers. And then we have SSI, self-sovereign identity, which is actually quite important one because it underpins our ability through blockchain to stay in control of our own personal data. Of course, in the last decade, with the rise of social media, we saw things like the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where Facebook, used our data against us in the American elections. And there are many examples like that. And that has instilled in us a sense that we don't want big companies to own our data. So it's important for us that we don't have to provide that all the time, that we're not at their mercy for that. And there, blockchain technology, especially in the metaverse, can make an important difference. Because if we're moving into a metaverse where we're bringing a virtual avatar of ourselves with us everywhere, we have our own profile. We want that to be what we call a super profile. We control the profile and we control what is or is not shared, and we can take it with us anywhere without having to provide all the data upfront every time. Then there is what I call DGov, decentralized governance, or in the most actual form right now, it's DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, which are the blockchain alternative to the traditional legal structures for organizations and companies. That in itself is a topic we could spend a keynote on that would last 4 hours. So if you're interested in that, I really highly recommend you to start reading about DAOs, because they will completely change the way we do business, the way the world is set up. And in a virtual space like the metaverse, of course, it becomes extra important, because having a DAO there will allow organizations in this virtual world to come into existence that are controlled by basically its token holders from around the world. And then finally, we have NFTs. Something that has been mentioned many, many times. It's been on the news, it's been on the papers, everybody's heard about it, and it's having a massive impact. But a lot of people also have the wrong idea. So we're going to go into that deeper in a second. Now, all of this together is what we call the MetaFi, which basically means it's the financial structure or the financial framework that underpins the metaverse and makes it all possible. And that all has to do with that interoperability. Because through the trustless transactions and through the peer-to-peer networks that blockchains make available, it's suddenly possible to connect all these different experiences and worlds that together then form the metaverse. So to say it in one sentence, an all-encompassing term for protocols, products, and services that enable the complex financial interplay between non-fungible and fungible tokens, their derivatives, within the scope of the wider ecosystem. So I had an interesting term there, non-fungible token versus fungible token. We already mentioned them, NFTs. So what is an NFT? And what is the difference between a non-fungible token and a fungible token? Well, Non-fungible basically means that this asset cannot be exchanged for another one. It's unique. So imagine it like this. In the physical world, we might have a Rembrandt painting. You can have multiple Rembrandt paintings, but each one is completely unique. And if I want to change my Rembrandt painting for yours, if you're so lucky to have one, we can do that, but there will be a change. It looks different and it also represents a different value. NFTs are basically the same, but they're not actually the painting itself. They represent the certificate of authenticity and ownership. So what an NFT is not, it's not a JPEG. It's not a Bored Ape picture. It's also not actually intellectual property rights. It's like a certificate that represents your ownership, and when it comes to virtual assets, authenticity of that asset. Which, by the way, is of course super important for the metaverse. Because up until this time on the internet, all the virtual assets that we had, whether they be pictures, documents, files, have always been fungible. They are exchangeable. I can make a copy of this Keynote, I can give it to you, and then we wouldn't know which is the original unless it says so in the name of the file. So they are completely interchangeable. And it's also impossible for me to say, look, this is my Keynote, this is the original, I own this, and you have a fake one, or you have a copy. But with the introduction of NFTs, that changes. Not just for the virtual world, but it also brings with it a massive impact for the real world. We'll talk about that in a second. But just for now, I want to ask you guys a question again. NFTs are on the news. You've probably heard about the massive numbers that are involved with the transactions and the pricing for some of these Bored Ape pictures, which is just one expression, one of the earliest expressions of how NFTs are being used. But what do you think that the market capitalization of NFTs is today? We're going to go into another Deloitte vote now. Team, take it away. There we go. I want you guys to share with me what you think is the current market size for NFTs. 2 billion. 100 billion. I like how these numbers are all so far apart. 2 billion, 12 billion, 25 billion. Well, it's all in the billions. 100 million miljard. I like that one, thanks. 1 trillion, somebody even said. Okay, super cool. Right, so thank you for your answers. Thank you for trying to think about it. Today, right now, the current market capitalization of NFTs, the team is going to show the slide right now, yes, is actually around, can't read that, 54 billion. No, NFT trading volume, 27 billion. Sorry, 27 billion. That's NFT trading volume today. And this has grown from basically almost zero just a few years ago. So at the top right, you see a matrix which is showing a few things, and I'm going to explain that now. You see on the left, you see DAU of Roblox and Minecraft. That's the daily average users. And the reason this is important, because it gives you an idea of the adoption of virtual worlds in which these NFTs play such an important role. Now, for those of you out there that have kids, I don't know what they're doing right now, but I can tell you statistically that kids between 9 and 12, about 60% of them are playing Roblox or Minecraft right now. And what this means is that Generation Z and after are already completely used to that idea of having a virtual clone of ourselves, avatar in a virtual space that lives a virtual life. And that's where these NFTs come in, because suddenly, in the old school world, if you buy cosmetics, if you buy something for your virtual avatar, you don't own it. It's owned by the studio that is selling it to you because it's still within their world. But with NFTs, that can change. And so we already see that the market for NFTs today, just from virtual skin revenue, for example, is already 5 billion around the world, right? In 2021, that was in 2005, it was 5 billion virtual skins in games when it was not NFTs. And today we see that it's already at 54 billion around the world. And that is a factor 10 growth in 6 years. So 10x in 6 years. So that means if we draw that line and continue on to 2028, this is going to be a 540 billion market just on itself, which is why, coming back to the metaverse estimate, I think that's on the low side. NFT use cases. So we talked a little bit about the market size, give you an idea of what's going on there. But what can NFTs be used like? Because we already said they're not Bored Apes, they're not JPEGs. So what can we use them for? Well, one of the things that's already risen is collateral for loans. Because an NFT can represent an actual asset, you can also take that asset just like you could take your house or your car and use it as collateral for a loan. Thereby, you can get money just by owning the NFT, while the NFT, just like any other crypto, can still keep accumulating wealth over time. An interesting aspect of NFTs, which is, in my opinion, going to completely change the retail world, is yield generation. Imagine that you're buying a pair of shoes from Adidas today. That pair of shoes is only going to last you so long. After a year or 2 years, depending on how much you wear them, they're going to be completely broken and you have to throw them away. This is because we live in a world where we depend on built-in obsolescence because that's what drives our economy. We need to sell more, we need to consume more, and we need to buy more. But in a world where you could sell that same Adidas shoe with an NFT, the NFT could get the instruction to include a yield or a royalty. Which means that if I have that shoe and I sell it again a year later because it's still great and it's cool, or even 5 or 10 years later when it's retro, Adidas can still receive a part of the proceeds. They can still be paid for the resale of that shoe, which might completely change the retail industry because suddenly the retail industry doesn't need to build for obsolescence. They don't need to make your clothing so that they break down next year, so that you buy new ones. Because they can make it so that you can keep selling it, and then someone else can sell it again and again and again and again. And they keep making money just for the fact that they created it and designed it. Charge to X is another super interesting potential new business model. An NFT is not something that is static. Unlike a traditional deed as we have them today, which takes a lot of work to change again over time if you want to include different benefits or features, an NFT is programmable by its nature. So you can set up an NFT beforehand that if it becomes charged through tokens, for example, it can gain new benefits. This is, for example, what Gary Vaynerchuk did in his NFT collection. You bought the NFT, you can then have the right to meet him in a virtual meeting a few times a year, and you get a present every year. But if you spend more tokens on it, then you get to unlock extra features, like more VIP time or a private meeting, or perhaps even to go to an island where he holds a conference, or to get special early access to some of his programs or training sessions or whatever. NFTs can be built like that, and therefore the value of the NFT will increase as more features are unlocked over time. There's a lot of extra options on this slide here. There's the network effect, social token economics, for example, which is a really interesting one, extra earn, fractionalization. I'm not going to go over all of these, but there's 2 more that I would really like to go into. First one is the social token economics. In our company was trying to find funding last year. We were building a metaverse, or part of it, before it was really popular. Before people heard about it. Before, the big corporates in this world decided to spend billions on developing it. But we needed money to develop our ideas, our vision of the future. And so we posted an article in the Dutch Forbes, which is called Quote Magazine. And we asked for $500,000. It's not even that much. Personally, I think it's not that much. But guess how many people actually decided to respond? 0. Nobody called. Nobody thought it was valuable. Nobody was interested. So we decided, well, we're building a virtual platform on a blockchain. Why don't we just tokenize our idea and go to the crypto community that is a little bit more forward thinking and ask them to fund us? And so we did. We gave out tokens, the very same tokens that will power our economic ecosystem and that allow us to mint NFTs. And we did what we call a private and a strategic allocation round, and we're going to do a token generation event, which is like an IPO, but in the digital crypto world later this year or next year. As a result, we were able to bring in $3.5 million of funding, seed funding. The funny thing is that we didn't sell a single share to do that. Nothing. We still own our own company ourselves. We didn't give away anything. Well, we got the money to do it, and people are invested. That's just an amazing way of using blockchain technology. And in a world that is going to be increasingly virtualized, the metaverse, things like this will completely change how we as companies, individuals, or communities go about getting the seed funding that we need to start new projects. And then there's the final one that I want to cover, X to earn, which are business models that are specific to the metaverse. Play to earn, where to earn, experience to earn, pay to earn, and learn to earn. But the last two are separate. The first three, let's go over those. In a virtual world on a blockchain where you are completely in control of your own data, you suddenly can also trade that data. So instead of, big corporates taking your data and then using it to sell you stuff you don't want or might not want, instead you can decide to sell your data to those companies so that they better understand their target audience, which is exactly what is experience to earn and play to earn. The other two, pay to earn and learn to earn, are also incredibly interesting. There's already a website called, or a company called Hundo, and they're building a blockchain platform for the metaverse where you can go to learn new skills, the skills that are in demand at that moment in the market. And because they're in demand, companies can decide to invest in these tokens, which then allows you to basically go and learn and generate tokens for yourself, which act as an income for you, crypto income. So you get paid to learn what the market is asking for today. Super interesting stuff. Go and check it out. It's going to change the way we look at learning. Rather than us paying to go to university, university is going to pay us. I know, it sounds crazy, but it's happening already today. So, in short, the short-term future of the metaverse, as far as I can tell, because like I said before, nobody truly understands what is coming and how it's going to change our lives completely. But the short term, notaries and a lot of people that work in legal, their jobs are going to completely change. Because anything that has to do with deeds can be done on a blockchain in a fraction of the time for a fraction of the money. Transactions, same thing. We are now in a financial system that is built on legacy systems, on legacy systems, on legacy systems. There's still AS400 servers running, which I was already, having trouble finding developers for when I worked at OGD 15 years ago. And still these systems are running, but they're all going to be replaced by blockchain technology and the metaverse. Letters of credit, traditional seed, VC, I already discussed all of that. It's going to completely change. If you don't start looking into this now, you're going to be, well, not too late, but let's just say that it will be of great benefit to you and your client if you start to discover this stuff today and start reading up about it. Cool. There's a few more use cases coming up now, but rather than talk more about them, I first want to show you guys a video. So if the team in the back is ready with it, I'd like to jump into that now. Customer Experience Center. Rather than go to IKEA to buy your kitchen, you stay at home, you put on a headset and you see it. But avatars in the virtual space, they won't be able to move like humans, will they? Yes, they will, because you just use your iPhone to capture yourself while you're dancing around your kitchen. But what about facial expressions? In a few minutes, or in a few seconds, you'll see a video that shows you that facial expressions will also be tracked by your mobile phone. But we don't want to put on these big ski goggles to experience this world, right? Don't you worry, because we're already having glasses being developed that look as fancy as your sunglasses with everything built in, allowing you to have a heads-up display or full visual virtual reality immersion just by putting them on. Good morning. What's your schedule for today? Tell me what's in my fridge. Do I need to buy more milk? I know that this still looks like it's a science fiction movie, but this is just a few years down the road. Teleportation technology. You're thinking to yourself, but if I go into a meeting and everybody's wearing these clunky headsets, How does that work? Well, it won't have to, because you're wearing these super fancy glasses and you can just teleport into a space through real-time rendering of that environment within the next 5 to 10 years. You can meet any CEO, any executive, your manager, your team, anywhere around the world, and you can feel like you're in the same physical space. Healthcare is going to be completely revolutionized. They're already using it today, using virtual reality headsets, so they need to use less anesthetics by showing people their families or something that calms them down. Some people even go for a walk while they're in the hospital, improving their recovery. And this is what I told you earlier about facial recognition. We will be able to recognize somebody's avatar's facial expressions and thereby get an idea of what they're feeling and thinking, just like in the real world. Yes, science fiction is gonna be reality. Okay. So if this is all this amazing world that's heading towards us, you know, what's in the way? What's going to stop us from truly reaching that potential? Or perhaps more importantly, what is stopping your clients or the company that you work for today from making this step? Well, to be honest, it's fairly simple, and yet it isn't at the same time. One of the things that will be a major obstacle is, of course, investment. It will take not a little bit of effort to transform modern organizations into these new metaverse-enabled companies that use blockchain, that use virtual reality, augmented reality, etc. Like we saw at the end of the 90s, it might very well not be the big companies today that will be the winners of the new age that we're transitioning into. Another thing that's really holding back companies and people in general is blue ocean thinking, as I call it, or maybe I should say the lack of blue ocean thinking. Just like, you know, at the end of the 80s, people told you that, you know, they didn't need or want an internet. Like at the end of the 90s, they told you that they didn't need or want a mobile phone. The fact is that it's going to come, whether people think they want it or not. But if they choose to think that they don't want it and therefore don't need it and don't need to do anything with it, they will not be prepared, and it will hit them, well, it will overwhelm them and change the way they live, but they will be, as you know, in a way, they will be a victim of it. It will happen to them rather than them deciding how to integrate it into their lives or into their businesses. I think we're coming about to the end. Well, not exactly the end. We have about 23 minutes left, and I want to spend the time together with Emily from Deloitte to ask any and all questions that you guys might have about the metaverse, because I hope that this presentation has given you a lot to think about. If the keynote comes back on, there will also be a QR code, so feel free to add me on LinkedIn if you want to continue the conversation after our session today.
Yeah, thank you, Aragorn, for your story and the insights, of course. During the session, I already saw some questions in the chat dropping in. So if you have questions, please drop it in the chat, and we will come to it and get through other questions. But let me start with the first one. And I think it's a fundamental question about the metaverse in general. And I see that a lot of people have a hard time understanding what exactly is the difference between a virtual reality world and the metaverse. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Of course, of course. When you look at the development of the internet and also computer gaming, what you see is that there's all these experiences built, whether they be websites or virtual or games, but they're all pretty siloed. Each stands on their own. If you go and play a game from the end of the 90s or the 2000s, or even today, you go into that game and you can do whatever you want in that game, but you are not able to take any of the assets from that world. You cannot take the way you look in that world with you. You cannot take it to a different world and then use it there, right? If you ever played World of Warcraft and you have gold in World of Warcraft, you can't leave World of Warcraft, take your gold with you, well, not easily anyway, you'd have to do illegal stuff, and then bring it to a different game. And the same goes, you know, for platforms. If you're on Facebook today and you did something there, or if you're on LinkedIn, you can't just take that stuff and go to another platform, bring it with you. It's quite complicated. You have to download a file, etc.
So you basically say that the interoperability between the platforms, that's the main difference. So it's more about the technology behind the metaverse than the 3D environment or virtual
Absolutely.
reality environment itself.
Yeah, yeah, but all of these technologies and these developments, they interact with each other. They influence each other, right? The smartphone today has a touchscreen and a really small but really sharp display on it. And we didn't know that that was going to come when we were holding our Nokia's 6610s and they had green screens with Snake on it, right? We had no idea that that was coming. But that's what's going to happen to the metaverse as well. But the interoperability, the connectivity, which is, by the way, powered and made possible through blockchain technology and trustless transactions, that's what really makes the difference.
Interesting, yeah, yeah. And another question, and I think it's an interesting one that Giovanni asked. He
Hi,
asked,
Giovanni.
do you think there will be a few leading companies for the metaverse in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, let me emphasize first that, I'm not, I can't look into my glass bowl and predict the future. What I know, what I can see looking at the data and looking at our history is that we really can't, we just have no way of knowing what's happening. In fact, if we look at history, there's never been a time like this. There's never been a convergence of technologies all reaching this level of maturity and then influencing each other. Is it possible that there will be some major companies that take over this world or build it, another walled garden approach? Yes, it's possible.
Maybe it's the same as you have on the internet. You have some leading companies on the internet, like the Google. It's not the internet itself, of course, but it is a leading company on the platform or on the...
It's possible. And at the same time, I see that around the world, because we have the experience and the knowledge from the 90s to 2000s up until now, when we look at the internet, the World Wide Web, and social media, and so how that has developed, and we have learned from that. Right? We don't want to have another Cambridge Analytica situation. So right now, and through crypto, this is possible because there's a lot of funding for it becoming available. Around the world, there's a massive amount of initiatives, companies like our own, like your Open Metaverse, that are working to build a different version of that future. An open, decentralized future that puts us as users and as brands in the driver's seat without having that negative impact on privacy, etc.
Maybe that also brings me to the question I saw earlier in the chat, because we have it we talk about decentralized companies. But before you used some examples from Decentraland, from Sandbox. Can you maybe first explain what those companies are doing and how it differs from, in your perspective, from the layer 1 metaverse?
Yes, of course. So now we're going into layer 2 metaverses versus layer 1. So first,
maybe you can explain what Decentraland and what Sandbox are doing.
So Decentraland and Sandbox, basically what they did is they took the concept of building a virtual world, and then they stuck that on top of a blockchain, and then that makes it possible to assign ownership and authenticity to assets within that world. Right? So the world is still predefined, just like a computer game. They made a decision on, what the style it has, what it looks like. There's just like our real world as laws of physics. But ultimately, because it's on top of a blockchain, it can in the future be connected to other blockchains and therefore other worlds. And it's possible to make the assets in that world and transfer ownership to the actual person that paid for that NFT or that virtual land plot. That's what they're doing. The complexity of that is that in and of itself, it's still a siloed approach, right? These worlds, if Decentraland today would say, we're stopping, all the servers are being shut down, then basically you have the NFT that shows that you own a piece of land in Decentraland, but if Decentraland is not there, you have nothing, right? And that's where the difference, and that's the importance of persistency, which is another term I didn't mention in the keynote, but which is essential for the metaverse. Persistency, knowing that that virtual environment or asset will always be available, just like in the real world, this table, well, unless we throw it away and it gets destroyed, but it will be available. So if I buy it, I know that it's going to be here.
Yeah, so it's not about the content on the platform, how you're responsible for the content on the platform, but it's more about how you can take your assets with you when you go to another environment, and also if the platform will be deleted.
Yeah, that's the interoperability. And then the other side of that is the persistency, and this is what we're trying to achieve with, for example, a layer 1 metaverse, is that by building a layer 1 metaverse, that ultimately in the future will become a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, which basically means that it is being owned by its inhabitants. That's a very simplified way of putting it, but it's like we're in Utrecht here, or we're in Amsterdam today. It would be like saying that Amsterdam city actually belongs to the people that live there, which actually is true, because if you own a house in Amsterdam, you own a little piece of Amsterdam.
Yeah.
But in virtual space, up until this point, that wasn't possible. But through NFTs and tokenization, it can be. And you can build in tokenomic mechanics that allow you to bring in the revenue, so to speak, or the money necessary to keep the infrastructure up and running for as long as the DAO exists and people are using the platform.
Interesting. I also see a question in the chat from Sebastian about sustainability, but maybe Sebastian, you want to ask it by yourself. So can you unmute yourself and ask the question? Not sure how this is technically possible.
Does the team need to unmute him, or does he need to unmute himself?
I'm checking at the technical stuff if this works this way. Otherwise, I will just ask his question. Let me.
You have to unmute yourself, Sebastian.
De Leeuw Bouter.
Yeah, sorry.
Hey.
Well, I wrote the question down, so I guess I'm going to have to read it myself. So with all the data and connectivity going on, what's going to be the impact on our environment? Sustainability is, of course, a major topic now. So how does the metaverse and how is it going to contribute to a sustainable world in terms of energy use? So yeah, there might be less travel because we're going to be together in one room with fancy sunglasses.
Yeah.
But does that really outweigh the energy impact of the metaverse and blockchain and everything that you hear going on now? Can you tell a little bit more about that?
Well, yes, I can, and I love that you're asking the question. But it's a very big question actually, because there's a certain aspects to it. First of all, you mentioned something like blockchain, and I know that right now in the public eye, there's the idea that blockchain, at least blockchain based on proof of work like Bitcoin, is in essence always a massive power drain. And then, you know, the blockchain protagonists say, yeah, but we're using green energy. And then people again say, yeah, but we could be using that green energy for something else. And it's a complicated conversation. But think of it this way. Proof of work has significantly different features and benefits than proof of stake. And therefore, it would be very beneficial to keep it. If we look at the world's energy consumption, we know that around the world there are peaks and there are throws. Right? In the Netherlands, we don't always have our lights on, we don't always have our computers on. And the benefit of proof of work, blockchain technology, is that you can turn it off and it doesn't matter. Right? If you turn it off, it's not like people don't have electricity in their home, or they can't use their computer, or they don't have access to some critical service. It's not like the banking system that if it goes offline, you know, you have a problem. So the mining part there can only be turned on when there's energy available, which can actually help us to solve some of our massive load balancing problems on the energy network. So the problem that people perceive with proof of work, in my opinion, isn't a problem at all. It's just, you know, propaganda by activists that don't truly understand the technology or its potential. Secondly, blockchain technology can help us solve a lot of other great things. For one, it could completely replace the current financial infrastructure, both hardware and software, which, like I said, is all legacy. It costs a massive amount of energy because it's super inefficient and it can be completely thrown out of the window. But the truth is, it's not going to happen from one day to the next. These things take time. But if we decide to completely delete or at least stop through legislation or regulation proof of work today, we will never see those benefits in the future. So I personally believe that the metaverse, rather than going to increase our environmental impact through blockchain, but also through the virtualization of our environment, will actually lead to a massive decarbonization in the longer run. And when I say long run, I mean, I think that we will see first seriously impact results within the next 10 years. 10 to 20 years, then it will really be clear that this is something that will help us to fix our world rather than destroy it.
Interesting. I think that sustainability is a topic we could discuss for hours probably, because apparently it has its good sides, and we all know that it has its bad sides, unfortunately. So I would suggest that we absolutely have a deep dive session about the topic sustainability with a lot of experts, and we will have a discussion and see what kind of.
I have a recommendation for you there,
Yeah.
but
Well, interesting to hear about that after this session. Let's see what other questions we have, and I think this one is also interesting. Like, what do you think that the metaverse, on what ways will it create new jobs, or what are potential use cases?
yeah. Yeah, well, there is a plethora of use cases, but those are two separate questions. So let's cover the first one first, jobs. Of course, many people are worried about jobs, right? We've seen this trend over the last decade where, industrialization, robotization, etc., has all led to job loss to some extent or another. But the reality is that we still have more jobs today than we did, 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So that job loss is actually not job loss, because what has happened is that there has been many more jobs come into existence simply as a result of the rise of these technologies or changes in how our society works. And the metaverse will be more of that. To give you a simple example, if you have a virtual space and you need a light show or anything like that in that virtual space, you need a lights guy just like you need one in the physical world. You also will need an audio guy just like you need in the physical world, right? So there's two jobs right there that might benefit, because as the metaverse grows and people can meet from all around the world, more events might take place, and so more people will be needed to do these kind of things. And that's not even to talk about, the massive rise that we're seeing in the need for spatial computing experts. Unreal Engine developers and Unity developers have seen a rise of close to 900% year over year in the last 4 years, right? So that's a massive amount of jobs worldwide that are coming into creation that didn't exist before.
But, how would a job like that look like?
Unreal Engine developers are basically the same as...
Developers, that's one I get.
Yeah, they're behind the computer. But a virtual lights guy, he can be behind his computer, or he can be in a virtual space with his avatar in a virtual twin. Both are possible.
So you expect that most of the jobs will be about developing the
I think what we're going to see is that because of the rise of this whole metaverse environment and the metafi that I discussed earlier, we'll see that a lot of value will be created, which will ultimately lead to people being able to be more flexible with their work, to have, and have less costs, and therefore allowing them to make more money in less time, etc., etc. So, yeah, I can't really say it's like I said before, it's almost impossible to really know what's going to happen, but I'm very positive about it.
Okay. Well, then the other question, I already asked it a little before, but what use cases do you see for us as Deloitte?
Yeah, use cases for Deloitte. Well, as a company itself or for the consultants out there?
I think both are interesting, but let's say as company itself.
Yeah, I think the use cases initially the most important impact will be as a result from the transfer from a traditional financial system onto a blockchain-based financial system. I think that's going to have massive impact. A lot of companies will have to do with this. Secondly, there's going to be a massive rise of what I call metaverse companies. So companies that might even be organized like a DAO in the next few years, and right now, legislation around the world is lacking, to say the least. If we look at the Netherlands, it was almost impossible for us to keep our company in the Netherlands, because if you do anything that is blockchain or crypto related, and your accounts can get frozen overnight, just instantly. So there's a massive challenge there to be tackled, and I think that might not be direct use case for Deloitte, but it's definitely something that Deloitte will have a major role in playing to advise your clients on how to deal with that. And then I haven't even spoken, of the rise of this whole secondary virtual economy that will be the metaverse, right? Because like I said, there's a whole generation of people out there already that are used to living in a virtual space, having a virtual clone, and they will want to do all the things that they can do in the physical world. So there's endless use cases.
Yeah, so one of the use cases will be that we might play a role in the field of legalization, the legal part, the privacy part, the
Absolutely.
risk part maybe.
You'll have to.
Yeah, And it also brings me to the other question. Someone asked, what risk do you see for our clients? We already discussed the legal part, of course, but
like I said earlier in my presentation, and by the way, this is actually a quote that I took from Alistair Hume. Alistair Hume released a video online called The Long-Term Future of the Metaverse. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you watch it. If you watch it, you'll see that there are some parallels to the way I told the story today. But Alistair Hume said, the companies that won big on the internet were not existing before the internet, right? Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Palo Alto, Oracle, all of these companies, they rose on the basically on the wave that is the internet, or was the internet and social media. And so the same thing is going to happen today. So if there's any risk to Deloitte's customers today, it's that they ignore this change, that they think, oh, it's just another hype, it's just another fad, this is just some kids playing a computer game, and they don't act on it. Because if they don't act on it today, they will be forgotten tomorrow.
interesting. And I see that we are running out of time. So one last question.
Yeah.
When can we meet in virtual reality, or even better, when can we have meetings in the metaverse?
Well, the meetings in the metaverse, that might take a little longer because metaverse is interoperability and persistency, but meeting in virtual reality is actually already possible today. Every Wednesday we organize Metaverse Exploring meetings, which by the way is a group we have on LinkedIn with CEOs and executives from metaverse companies around the world, and we organize exploration tours where every week there's a keynote speaker from the industry talking about things like scarcity in the metaverse economy, virtual bullying in the future, company policy when it comes to virtual experiences and meetings, all of that good stuff, all taking place in virtual space, and Altspace VR or Spatial or apps like that. So if you want to experience that, join us.
Interesting. And also within Deloitte, we have a center of expertise for visual innovations, where we also experiment and test with those kind of technologies. So feel welcome. Thank you, Aragon, for being here and for your story today. And thank you all for watching this session. And if you have any questions or feedback, yeah, connect with us.
Take the red pill, stay in Wonderland.